Good morning, and welcome to the BiomX First Quarter 2021 Financial Results and Corporate Update conference call. Currently, all participants are in a listen-only mode. There will be a question-and-answer session at the end of this call. I would now like to turn the call over to Marina Wolfson, Senior Vice President of Finance and Operations at BiomX. Please proceed.
Thank you, and welcome to the BiomX First Quarter 2021 Financial Results and Corporate Update conference call. The news release became available just after 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time today and can be found on our website at biomix.com. A replay of this call will be available on the Investors section of our website. Before we begin, I'd like to review the Safe Harbor provision. All statements on this call that are not factual historic statements may be deemed forward-looking statements. For instance, we're using forward-looking statements when we discuss on the conference call potential market opportunities, the capabilities of the BOLT platform, the design, aim, expected timing, and interim and final results of our preclinical, clinical trials and studies, the sufficiency of our existing cash equivalents, and short-term deposits, our pipeline and momentum, and the potential of our product candidates. Except as required by law, we do not undertake to update forward-looking statements. The full Safe Harbor provision, including risks that could cause actual results to differ from these forward-looking statements, are outlined in today's press release, which, as noted earlier, is on our website. Joining me on the call this morning are Jonathan Solomon, our Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Sailaja Puttagunta, our Chief Medical Officer, and Asaf Aron, our Chief Business Officer. With that, I will turn the call over to Jonathan.
Thank you, Marina, and good morning to everyone. In the first quarter of 2021, we continue to make substantial progress across our pipeline, and we remain committed to achieving our goal of delivering novel, naturally occurring, and synthetically engineered phage therapies that target pathogenic bacteria in the microbiome of patients with unmet medical needs. We are excited to be part of the leading efforts in the microbiome space, as this is a field which holds a lot of promise. Our approach is compromised at targeting specific strains of pathogenic bacteria in the microbiome that are strongly associated with the diseases and conditions we are investigating. Our rationally designed phage cocktails have the potential to restore the natural, healthy balance of the microbiome to provide patients with safe and effective treatment options. Using our proprietary BOLT platform, we can generate and screen large libraries of phage, prioritizing potential candidates based on selectivity and potency, as well as a number of other parameters that are important for drug development, such as safety, stability, and ease of manufacturing. With a focus on executing our priorities, we have successfully and rapidly advanced our phage cocktail candidates in 5 indications, and we expect to have potentially clinically meaningful readout in 4 different indications within the next 14 months. These important clinical milestones include a phase 2 readout from our program of BX001 in acne-prone skin, where results from the 8-week treatment period are expected in the third quarter, followed by results from the 12-week treatment period in the fourth quarter. Next, for our BX004 program in cystic fibrosis, we expect results from part 1 of our phase 1b/2a trial in the first quarter of 2022, and results from part 2 of this trial in the second quarter of 2022. We are also planning a phase 1b/2a readout for our BX003 program in inflammatory bowel disease and primary sclerosing cholangitis expected in the second quarter of 2022. Finally, by the first half of 2022, we expect phase 2 proof of concept results for BX005 in atopic dermatitis. The combination of capabilities of our BOLT platform, along with broad acceptance of phage inherent safety, enables us to develop, manufacture, and formulate novel phage therapy candidates that target particular pathogenic bacteria at an unprecedented speed. Having all these capabilities in-house has helped us build a diverse portfolio spanning various indications. To that end, I would like to discuss each program in detail. I will start off with BX001 in acne-prone skin. BX001 is a topical gel comprised of a cocktail of naturally occurring phage that target the bacteria Cutibacterium acnes, or C. acnes, which is implicated in the pathophysiology of acne vulgaris. In March, we announced the initiation of our phase 2 cosmetic clinical trial, and today we are announcing completion of enrollment of 140 subjects with results at the 8-week and 12-week treatment periods expected in the third and fourth quarters of this year, respectively. The phase 2 study will evaluate 140 subjects with mild to moderate acne vulgaris over a 12-week period, and the key endpoints include safety, tolerability, and efficacy of BX001. Additionally, we'll evaluate the clinical meaningful improvement of acne-prone skin, as well as a reduction of C. acne burden, and we look forward to reporting on these results in the upcoming months. In February, we announced positive phase 1A pharmacokinetic results of BX002 in inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD, and primary sclerosing cholangitis, or PSC. The data demonstrated that BX002 was safe and well tolerated when orally delivered, with no serious adverse events. Additionally, the study met its objective in delivering high concentrations of viable phage to the gastrointestinal tract, approximately 10 to the 10th plaque-forming units, which equals approximately 1,000 times more viable phage compared to the anticipated bacterial burden of Klebsiella pneumonia in the stool of IBD patients. To the best of our knowledge, this was the first ever clinical study describing pharmacokinetics of an orally delivered phage under a U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved IND protocol. With these results in hand, we plan to advance this program to a phase 1b/2a trial of BX003, orally administered to either healthy subject or IBD or PSC subjects who are confirmed carriers of the target bacteria Klebsiella pneumonia in their gut. Results are expected in the second quarter of 2022, with key endpoints evaluating safety, tolerability, and efficacy of BX003, as measured by the reduction of the amount of target bacteria measured in stool. As you may recall, in November 2020, we consolidated our IBD and PSC programs into one product candidate named BX003 for both indications, with a single broad host range phage cocktail that targets Klebsiella pneumonia strains. Next, I will turn to our cystic fibrosis, or CF program, and our atopic dermatitis program, in which we recently announced BX004 and BX005, respectively, as a newly selected phage cocktail for itch indication, respectively. We believe that our ability to quickly select these phage cocktail candidates further validates the cutting-edge methodologies and capabilities of our BOLT platform. I will now turn the call over to Sailaja Puttagunta, our Chief Medical Officer, to discuss our CF program.
Thank you, Jonathan. BX004 is our newly selected phage cocktail candidate designed to target Pseudomonas aeruginosa, or P. aeruginosa, a bacteria that causes chronic respiratory infections and is a main contributor to morbidity and mortality in patients with CF. The current treatment options available to CF patients suffering from these chronic infections typically require prolonged and repeated courses of various antibiotics, and over time, their effectiveness diminishes as multi-drug resistant strains appear. BX004 has the potential to be both active against antibiotic-resistant strains of P. aeruginosa and to penetrate biofilm, an assemblage of surface-associated microbial cells enclosed in an extracellular polymeric substance and one of the leading causes of antibiotic resistance. Based on our interactions with the FDA, we received guidance that due to the well-established safety profile of phage, we could advance BX004 directly into a proof-of-concept trial in CF subjects, thereby skipping preclinical toxicity and healthy volunteer studies. With the company's desire to address as many patients as effectively as possible, we are working closely with the Cystic Fibrosis Therapeutic Development Network, a network of leading US-based CF physicians. As a result, we are updating our phase 2 proof-of-concept study to a phase 1b/2a trial comprised of 2 parts in order to accommodate the recommendations of the Cystic Fibrosis Therapeutic Development Network. These are the recommendations that the Therapeutic Development Network makes to all programs at this stage to help ensure study consistency and patient safety. Additionally, we are pleased to announce that Dr. David Nichols, an experienced cystic fibrosis clinical investigator and clinician, will be assisting us with this trial as the academic principal investigator through the Therapeutic Development Network. Part 1 of the phase 1b/2a trial will evaluate the safety, pharmacokinetics, microbiologic, and clinical activity of BX004 with a single ascending dose followed by multiple doses in 8 CF subjects that are confirmed to have chronic P. aeruginosa respiratory infections. Results from Part 1 of this trial are expected in the first quarter of 2022. Part 2 of this trial will evaluate the safety and efficacy of BX004 treatment over 10 days in 21 CF subjects with chronic P. aeruginosa respiratory infections, the same population as Part 1. Results from Part 2 of this trial are expected by the second quarter of 2022. We look forward to continuing to work closely with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation in order to bring a safe and effective treatment to patients with CF. And now, I will turn the call back to Jonathan Solomon to discuss the remainder of our programs.
Thank you, Sailaja. Turning our attention to Atopic Dermatitis program, we have recently selected a phage cocktail, BX005, designed to target Staphylococcus aureus, or S. aureus, a bacterium associated with the development and exacerbation of inflammation in atopic dermatitis. S. aureus is known to be more abundant over the lesional skin of atopic dermatitis patients compared to the skin of healthy individuals or non-lesional skin of atopic dermatitis patients. The target bacteria also increases in abundance and becomes dominant when patients experience flares. We expect results from phase 2 proof of concept clinical study evaluating the safety and efficacy of BX005 in atopic dermatitis patients in the first half of 2022. Finally, the last program we'll discuss today is our colorectal cancer program, in which we are developing synthetically engineered phage designed to target strains of bacteria found in colorectal tumors. Currently, only a small percentage of new colorectal cancer cases respond to immunotherapy, which is believed to be due to the lack of novel tumor antigens and scarcity of immune cells in colorectal tumors. Our approach enables the phage to deliver cancer therapeutic payloads directly to tumors that are hard to reach or impact. We have observed in vitro and in vivo that our phage therapy can target strains of Fusobacterium nucleatum, or F. nucleatum, a bacterial species that is enriched in colorectal tumors. We are exploring phage-mediated delivery of payload genes, such as those encoding immunostimulator proteins, GM-CSF and IL-15, to colorectal tumors while also eradicating the target bacteria. Preclinical results from animal studies evaluating the use of our phage therapy in combination with checkpoint inhibitors are expected in the second and third quarters of 2021. As just described, our progress this quarter sets up for potentially meaningful results in 4 indications in the next 14 months. As we advance toward mid-stage development in the microbiome space, we will continue to provide insights on restoring health to the microbiome by using phage therapies to remove bacteria that potentially drive pathology in diseases and chronic conditions. With all of our capabilities in-house and the understood safety of phage, we have the opportunity to provide patients with better treatment options. We are excited to continue investigating the clinical safety and efficacy of our phage therapies for our existing indications as well as possible new indications. Before I conclude, I would like to mention that we'll be holding a virtual KOL event highlighting BX003 for the treatment of IBD on Wednesday, May 26th at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. We believe that there is considerable potential for phage therapy to restore the balance in the microbiome for this condition. This will be a very interesting event with Dr. Ryan Balfour-Sartor, a renowned academic expert in IBD, who will be leading the discussion, and we hope you will join us. We look forward to keeping you informed on our progress. I'd like now to turn the call over to Marina Wolfson, our Senior Vice President of Finance and Operations, to cover our financial results for the first quarter of 2021.
Thank you, Jonathan. As a reminder, the financial information is available in the press release we issued earlier today, and also in more detail in our Form 10-Q, which will be filed later today. I will walk you through some of our brief highlights. Cash balance and short-term deposits as of March 31st, 2021 were $53.6 million compared to $57.1 million as of December 31st, 2020. We estimate that existing cash equivalents, and short-term deposits will be sufficient to fund the company's current operating plan until at least mid-2022. Research and development expenses were $5.8 million in the first quarter of 21 compared to $3.5 million for the same period of 2020. The increase is primarily due to stock-based compensation and salaries and related expenses, mainly due to the growth in the number of employees in R&D and clinical activities and expenses related to conducting preclinical and clinical trials of our product candidates. General and administrative expenses were $2.5 million in the first quarter of 21 compared to $2.1 million for the same period in 2020. The increase is primarily due to stock-based compensation, salaries and related expenses, mainly due to the growth in the number of employees, and an increase in expenses associated with operating as a public company, such as directors and officers' insurance. Net loss was $8.4 million in the first quarter of 2021 compared to $5.9 million for the same period of 2020. Net cash used in operating activities was $6.4 million for the 3 months ended March 31st, 2021, compared to $6.9 million for the same period of 2020. We'd now like to open the call up for questions. Operator?
Thank you. At this time, we'll be conducting a question and answer session. If you'd like to ask a question, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad, and a confirmation tone will indicate your line is in the question queue. You may press star 2 if you would like to remove your question from the queue. For participants using speaker equipment, it may be necessary to pick up your handset before pressing the star keys. One moment, please, while we poll for questions. Once again, that's star 1. Thank you. Our first question is from the line of Kristen Kluska with Cantor Fitzgerald. Please proceed with your questions.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking my questions, and congrats on completing enrollment in the acne study. The first question I have here is a big picture one. So there was a recent study published in Nature highlighting that the microbiome might have been more diverse in the past from comparing some samples that were up to 2,000 years old. And the authors also highlighted that the present microbiome has more of the antimicrobial resistant strains. So not sure if you're familiar with this particular paper, but I wanted to ask how you believe over time the microbiome composition has changed and how this could correlate with some of the more prevalent and chronic indications, including some of which you're evaluating.
Hi, Kristen. Pleasure chatting this morning. Very familiar with the paper. I think very interesting work that follows on a bunch of papers before. And in general, I think you see more and more loss of diversity of the microbiome. And I think there's a greater need to kind of engineer it precisely and avoid antibiotic resistance. So I think we, at BiomX, we feel that this will play an essential role, A, taking out specific bacteria without, blasting the microbiome with more antibiotics, which is just causing more loss of diversity. And second, what we're seeing in some of these pathogens kind of occupy niches that, they're dominant in it. So with a phage, you can kind of open up the niche and enable engraftment of more diverse bacteria. So I think it all supports what we're all seeing in research, from all across, right? We need greater diversity. We need to avoid using antibiotics as a therapy for these chronic indications.
Thanks. And then as you're progressing along the pipeline through the BOLT platform and also resorting to a personalized phage therapy approach for some indications, could you remind us of the current Phage Bank you have on hand and efforts to expand this? And then what work would need to go into finding new phage if necessary to keep it within the rapid timeframes you've laid out?
Right. So I think at BiomX, our conclusion has been that instead of investing in a large phage bank, we're actually investing in an infrastructure and a large sample, collection from, whether it's various bodies of water, sewage, et cetera, whatever you can think of, or we don't want to, discuss so early in the morning. And you can see the progress, right? So I think when we came out with BX003, which is a broad cocktail that targets the strains of Klebsiella, both in IBD and PSC, that was quite an undertaking that we were skeptical, and it took us almost 2 years to complete. And now with Staph aureus with BX005, within 2-3 months, we already had a phage cocktail that covered 90% of the strains. So I think you're seeing kind of the economies of scale and the platform mature as we learn how to handle, move quickly, and sort of, optimize all of our computational pipelines and robotic infrastructure.
Thanks. And for the atopic dermatitis study, could you walk through why you decided to evaluate a potential 8-week trial?
Sure. I'll let Sailaja address that question.
Thank you, Jonathan, and good morning, Kristen. So the atopic dermatitis trial, because of the mechanism of action of phage, where the hypothesis is if we reduce the bacterial burden of Staph aureus, that will then lead to a downstream change in the immune response and clinical improvement. So to accommodate that, we wanted to at least allow an 8-week period to allow us to detect the downstream effects of reducing the bacterial burden of Staph aureus.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Kristen.
Our next question comes from the line of Keay Nakae with Chardan Capital Markets. Please proceed with your question.
Thanks. Jonathan, you've given us the timelines to report data from the various studies. I'm wondering, with respect to BX003, 4, and 5, what are the gating items before you advance these into the actual clinical studies?
Right. So first, good morning, Kay. Always a pleasure. So I think generally, BiomX, we don't give guidance on initiation of studies. But as you know, the advantage of using these phage approach is that there is no tox study, there's no healthy volunteer study, right? So we can go straight to patients. So I'd say most of these projects are currently in various stages of GMP manufacturing. Kind of goes back, I think, to the question Kristen brought before. We quickly put together phage cocktails that look very promising. At that point, we can move straight to manufacturing, get ready, and gear up for a clinical study. And that's why we think these are maintaining the timelines we updated on.
Okay. And in terms of the CF study design, when we think about the Volt platform and the ability to use the learnings from initial patients to kind of zero in on an ideal formulation to advance, are these numbers large enough to allow you to fully optimize the capabilities of Volt to get to that ideal compound?
It's an excellent question. I think in CF we feel, I would say, more comfortable since there are case studies, the dozen patients that were treated, so we have some data that we're basing our thinking and rationale, and again, are benefiting from the support of the Therapeutic Development Network, the CF Foundation, that are all part of this. But to your point, we're going to get a lot of data from these studies, right? We know exactly which strains the patients have. We know the effect. We know how their bacterial composition looks after treatment. So far, we feel that BX004 looks very promising and could be the final product, the go-to market. But we can use the Volt platform to make these tweaks, and we think that there will be enough information if needed to make these tweaks.
Okay. And then just back to the acne study. Congrats on completing the enrollment. From here, what do you need to, I guess, keep close tabs on to make sure that when we get to the readout, no other, I guess, unforeseen variables enter into the equation?
Okay, just a clarification question. You mean from the clinical aspect or like business development or?
Yes, the first, Jonathan.
From the clinical aspect. Okay, I'll let Sailaja address that.
Thank you, Jonathan, and good morning, Kay. So yes, we're very pleased that we completed enrollment in this study and feel that we are on track to deliver top-line results from the 8-week endpoint in Q3 and then from the 12-week endpoint in Q4 of this year. Really, in terms of unforeseen variables that affect those deliverables, at this point, we don't see any major obstacles, Kay, and we believe we are on track to deliver.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Kay.
Thank you. As a reminder, you may press star 1 to ask a question. At this time, our next question is from the line of Joe Pantginis with H.C. Wainwright. Please proceed with your questions.
Good morning, everyone. This is Matt Keller on for Joe. Thanks for taking our question. A quick one for you. Related to BX003, based on the previous data showing impressively high levels of gut PFU you guys have shown, how confident are you that you're in the right dose range? And relatedly, how do you see this fitting into possible FDA discussions possibly down the road when it comes to identifying a minimally effective dose?
Right. So good morning, Matt. I think as we feel rather confident as the levels we achieved had an abundant levels of phage over bacteria. So again, what we know from the field, multiple studies, our internal work, is that you usually want to have, around 10 phage for every given target bacteria. As a reminder, we achieved levels which were 1,000 times higher than that. So there's definitely an abundance of phage, so that gives us a good therapeutic window together with the fact that the phage level stayed high for a few days. So I'd say we're fairly confident moving into the next study that we should get high exposure levels and hopefully detect a significant reduction in the bacterial count. In general, what we're trying to do in these initial clinical studies is actually to kind of go with the highest dose that is practical because we want to maximize the chance of seeing an effect. Again, if we see a strong effect, we can start titering down the doses. But currently, this is not due to the cost of goods with phage not being prohibitive. It's not a major issue, so I think we can move forward with the current dose. But later in the clinical development, we can always a bit tighter down.
Yeah, great. Thanks. That's very helpful. Thanks again for taking my question.
You bet.
The next question is coming from the line of Michael Higgins with Ladenburg Thalmann. Please proceed with your questions.
Hi, guys. Thanks for taking the question, and excuse me, congrats on continued progress. Question for you on the a couple, I guess, on the phase 1/2 studies, specifically in CF. What kind of dose range are you expecting to be tested in the phase 1b portion? And if you can't quantify by specific numbers, at least some sort of a range from bottom to low would be interesting. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, Michael. I'll let Sailaja address that question.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. So in terms of the dose range, the phase 1a in CF, that study, we're going to start with a single dose that is in the lower engine without going into specifics, testing a single dose first for safety, and then we'll move into single dose that will be 2 logs higher than the original one. And we, like with all of our other phage therapy candidates, we don't anticipate any safety issues here, but so anticipate moving rapidly through the multiple dose phase of the part 1b.
Thank you. And then I guess a quick follow-up in terms of atopic dermatitis. Same question, I suppose. What can you provide for us in terms of what doses may be tested in that study?
Sailaja, please go for it.
Okay, thank you. So in the atopic dermatitis, the first in human study, we're only planning to take the 1 dose relative to placebo in that study and move that forward. We do believe that will be the effective dose. So there's no dose ranging study planned for atopic dermatitis.
I guess just to follow up on that, what gives you confidence that you found the right dose to take into the phase 2?
So I can jump in. I think here in atopic derm, we're actually benefiting from the knowledge that we've seen in acne, right? And what we've seen to date is that usually you want to go with the highest dose that we can. As Saja mentioned, there is no dose-limiting toxicity, so we feel confident that that's the way you want to proceed. And again, we can calculate the ratio of phage to bacteria, and we feel we're well within a good therapeutic window.
That's great. And then just one follow-up on atopic dermatitis. How do you think it will work with other therapies in the study? Are they limited from using steroid gels and other atopic dermatitis treatments, or is it kind of an all-comers design? Thanks.
I think I'll let Salaja address the clinical study, and I can talk about just the general thinking of, phage approach with other therapies. So Saja, please go ahead.
Great. Thank you. So for the clinical study, we are not planning any exclusions there, and we are pretty much taking all comers. There will be some changes in terms of the washout periods based on existing therapies that patients have been on, but short of that, nothing really major.
Appreciate the details.
Right,
thanks, guys.
Sure, you bet.
Thank you. At this time, I'll turn the floor over to Jonathan Solomon for closing remarks.
So everyone, I wanted to thank you for joining us this morning. I want to thank the BiomX team who has worked hard to continue to develop phage therapies across a wide range of conditions, as well as shareholders for their support and the patients participating in our clinical trials. It's a very exciting period for BiomX with actually 4 meaningful clinical readouts in the next 14 months. And, we're excited to see the next few months. So everyone, please have a wonderful day, and please reach out to us if you have any additional questions.
Thank you. This will conclude today's conference. You may disconnect your lines at this time. Thank you for your participation.